approaches. We have more in common, don't let them divide. These suckers are vultures. Either we standing together or better be standing aside. Now is the time, don't know about you, but I'm gonna ride. We gotta climb, fight for your day, but where was your pride? Where are the gunners that you got inside? Look how our ancestors came to this country. They try to be living the American dream. Don't throw it away. They promise you money and catch your agent for the machine. Pick a new team, you blister to listen, but that is a system that you wanna bring. You need to think, we gotta fight communism, cause it look like we on the brink. Connect to the link, so one party system is taking the power from all of the people. We need to think, who are you listening? These people are evil and want you to sequence, so what is your plan? Hand in hand, we're standing together, cause it's the one never to do what you can. Please understand, we gotta do better, so walkers remember that we took a stand. Escúchame, 24 es el año, si se puede. Lucha, lucha por la libertad. Órale, vamos.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Latino Free Minds, episode 149. Danny, how you doing?
Doing good. It's February.
I know, right? January was like a blink, a blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye. Yeah.
But no, we're back with this episode, and we're gonna have a guest with us tonight. And I think they reached out to us, and we were in communication about getting this done. And when I text the group, I think we're all on the same page as far as this is a good opportunity so that not just us but everyone else that listens to this can learn. So we're gonna have immigration lawyer Alexander Carrion, I said it right, on with us, and we're gonna be able to, I think, learn a lot and just talk about what's been going on recently, and just any questions we might have of how the system works. Right? It's easy to talk about it, but when you learn firsthand from someone that actually is in the know of all that, it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be good for everybody. So Alex, thanks for coming on. How you doing?
How's it going, guys? Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. It's you're based out of New York, so we kind of kept them up late. So our apologies for that.
That's no problem at all. A little bit past my bedtime, but I'll live with it.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like I had mentioned, you're an immigration lawyer based out of New York. But before we get into all that, like, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, yeah. So I was born and raised in Long Island, New York. I've been here for almost all of my life, except for a couple of years where I studied at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. I was raised Catholic. Now I just generally identify myself as Christian, but I came back to New York to study immigration law at Hofstra Law School, Hofstra Law in Long Island again. I frankly completely fell into it on accident to become an immigration lawyer. In fact, when I was considering my options, because I wasn't too sure what I was going to do at the time, I only knew one thing for sure. I was not going to be that stereotypical Latino immigration lawyer. No way. Look what happened. So, the way that went down was, at first I wanted to work in politics. I wanted to work on Capitol Hill as a lawyer, and very quickly learned in my leap year between college and law school that I hated politics. I know how important it is, but to be in the discourse, constantly grinning to everybody around you, I just couldn't hack it. So I knew I wanted to be able to contribute to the community in some kind of a way, but I wasn't sure how. I was thinking about working in international law, being a diplomat. And then if you don't know this, in order to become an immigration lawyer, in order to become a lawyer, you have to make yourself eligible for the bar exam by contributing a certain number of hours of pro bono hours as a law student. So I was working with a nonprofit called Carrion, helping them assemble documentation so that they could get their paperwork to become United citizens. And in one afternoon, I helped 5 people become citizens. And it just occurred to me, I can practice my Spanish, I can help the community, I can do work that pays at least decently well, and I could do work that I could sleep at night with. I could never see myself being like a divorce attorney trying to keep people's kids away from each other. I couldn't see myself doing corporate law, but this was something where I knew I could be effective and I knew I could litigate. There's nothing I like more than to argue. So what I didn't realize at the time was that what craziness I was going to walk into once I got out of school. Because when I graduated in 2015, I had exactly one more year left of Barack Obama being the president of the United States, and then the very next year, I had to find out in November that this crazy guy Donald Trump just became president. And so my life got like it's like that theme song to the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. My life got flipped turned upside down, and we our life got wild, man. We lost options for our clients, like, and I understand, like I could see how some of these were reasonable, but I'll tell you later on today just how many ways our field changed in the first round of Donald Trump's administration, and now how he's doubling down on all those things in this new administration. And what I hope to be able to do here today is talk to people about not just what they can hope to achieve as immigrants and advocates, but also for people who are supporting ICE, like to look at them and say, listen, context as to who these people are. I have personally been able to thank some asylum officers and immigration officers for getting my clients out of deportation when, frankly, they were dead to rights in many ways to stay in detention or to be separated from their families. So there are reasonable people in those offices still. But
Hmm.
what I want to be able to emphasize when I do these talks is just how gray the area is. People assume I'm like, I have people who tell me I'm the good guy because I'm an immigration lawyer, and people are demonizing ICE. Both are untrue. Both are untrue. I can't tell you the kinds of people who I've met in my field who don't care about the work. So I just hope that today is a good time to be able to clarify so much obscure details that the media just tries to cut into being black and white, good guys and bad guys.
No, and
Yeah.
that's why it's exciting to have you on because we're just running off as assumptions and ideas that people put in our heads when we hear them, in mainstream media or social media posts and stuff like that. So I was telling Daniel that I was really excited for you to come on today so we can actually get educated, in this subject matter here.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I appreciate it. It's now my 2 months ago was my 10th year anniversary working in this field. It's been a
Nice.
wild, wild ride, and I've learned a lot of lessons and got a few stories if you want to hear them.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, for
definitely.
sure. Well, Danny, if you wanted to go with your first question, and then we'll just go from there.
Well, from our understanding, there's different cases that an immigration lawyer might have an expertise on or handle. Well, what is yours? Um,
I think I understand. Like, so if when it comes to immigration, there are three main branches. I mean, it's not quite so divided legally speaking, but it tends to be how people specialize. The first one is business immigration. If you've heard of somebody coming into the United States with something called an H-1B, or somebody comes in here as an artist, an athlete, sometimes as a religious worker, they generally go down that vein of obtaining a visa, whether it's temporary or with sponsorship, or sometimes their ability is so great that we need them in the United States. We don't care if they have a job right away. So that's business immigration. Second line of immigration is family petitions. That's the classic. 90-day fiance. I fell in love with somebody abroad. I want them to come to the United States. But it can also be that like I'm the child of an immigrant, and I want to make sure that my parents get their papers. So I just turned 21 years old. I want to make sure they get a green card. You can do that for your parents. You can do that for your kids, your spouses, and the one that many people don't know is your siblings can petition for you if that sibling is a United States citizen. So yeah, so there's family immigration, mostly done through mailings and through interviews at USCIS or the United States Citizen and Immigration Services. Then there's the third one, personally my favorite, which is litigation, deportation defense. That's where somebody's usually just on the way to getting deported. We step in to do our best in order to stop it. We usually use any one of about 4 or 5 different forms of relief, depending on what they qualify for, in front of the immigration court. And that's where we also plead bond.
okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, and I think okay. One of the things that I kind of wanted to ask about was DACA and their process. And obviously, if people know what DACA is, right? It's people that were brought here when they were very young, no they didn't have say in it, right? Their parents came and brought them, or they came with a relative. Um, as far as for them, like, I know that back when Trump was in office the first time around, he did offer a pathway for them in exchange for border wall funding, which the Democrats said no. I thought that was a mistake because, if you fast forward to today, well, he still built the wall and DACA got nothing. So I thought that was a misstep by the Democrats. But for someone that is a DACA recipient, a dreamer, what's the best route for them? Because I believe for you to sponsor someone, right, you have to be a family member or it has to be the employer, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of how I understand it. How would it work for someone that is DACA and, this is their home? This is what they know.
Well, that's the big tragedy about DACA right now, which is that they're really, really stuck as it is right now. DACA, just so we're clear, is a program that was initiated during the Obama administration, and it's never been renewed in the sense that there's been no new qualifying class of people since then who now newly qualify for DACA. These days, DACA is very rare for us in this field because although we're doing renewals still, unless you were somebody who was a holdover from that program, you will not qualify for any new version of that program that has come up since. So for people who have DACA, just so we're clear, it's not a legal status, so to speak. It's like DACA refers to deferred action of childhood arrivals. Deferred action is simply what they call a discretionary measure. It's a measure where the government, through this policy, they've just decided this XYZ group of people are not going to be pursued for deportation proceedings, and that is final. But unfortunately, as we're seeing, final is a very temporary thing in immigration law. DACA was in danger several times in the last decade. DACA could be in danger in the future, although right now I'm not hearing any news about that. DACA is something that cannot give you an avenue to a green card or citizenship under any circumstances, unfortunately. Now, what DACA does do is it gives you work authorization, social security number, so you can work in the United States and continue to live your life here. In the end, if you want to have more security, you're going to have to find another alternative way in order to get your papers. Yes, family petition is one. And in fact, it's very, very common. We get DACA applicants who are holdovers from that old program who fell in love with an American citizen that they found in college or in a job, and then they want to get their green card through there. Other times they obtain it because there's been a huge change in their home country. Like, for example, a Venezuelan. In the last 10 years, the situation has gotten worse and worse and worse in terms of the economic harm that's happening because of that totalitarian government that they had there under Maduro. But let's be clear, is still very present because the political party that was in place, even his vice president, is still running that country. So when those situations change, we can sometimes use asylum in order to help them plead, hey, don't send me home. I'm against this government. This government will be violent against me if I was to be returned home because I know what I'm going to say and I know what I'm going to do when I go there. I was raised with American values. And yes, under specific circumstances, although this would be really nuanced, you could ask an employer to sponsor for you for a visa. Now, there are plenty, unfortunately, of the three options that I just mentioned. Work visas are a little bit more sensitive because there are more ways to disqualify yourself for a work visa than there are for the others. But I would say this, while DACA in itself is just a safe little nook, legally speaking, it's not going to get you to anything permanent. You're going to have to find other alternative methods in order to get yourself out of deportation. I will tell you this, something that's occurring now much more often, and it's starting to rise, is something that they call 42B cancellation of removal. So this is for people who've never had any paperwork in the United States, never had a green card, so on and so forth. One of the qualifiers is you have to have been in the United States for 10 continuous years. And once you've been here for 10 years, you have to have a qualifying relative, which is either a parent, a spouse, or a child, and this is important, a child who's under the age of 21, who is going to, and I kid you not, will suffer more than the average a child, spouse, or parent would if you were to have been deported. It's a very sympathetic based form of removal. We plead that only and exclusively in the courts, and that usually is an option when you, let's say, have a child who had a pulmonary heart surgery and could need it in the future. That's very common when you have a valve defect when you were born. Throughout your childhood, you may need subsequent surgeries. Or if you have an allergy that's so severe, you may need an EpiPen in order to keep yourself safe. I had one case that was very interesting. There was a child who had leukemia but was in remission. Even though they were in remission, the cancer could come back, and they needed to be here to have those resources available in order to take care of them. So the reason why I'm saying that's becoming a bigger thing these days for DACA recipients is because now DACA is approaching its cruising past its 10-year mark. And so people who've been here for that length of time, now they have had the time to get married, have have children, or even potentially have a parent who somehow got their papers, and they can use that as an avenue for them to get a relief.
Okay. And then I guess one more follow up. So, like, for example, like, we have a friend, right? And he's a deputy sheriff. I know there's things like self petitions in a case like that, because I believe it has to be like your need. You kind of said about celebrities, right? Or like artists, they come in. It's like, oh, they're needed. But I would think, okay, someone that studied and became a sheriff's deputy would be needed in their community. So, and I was seeing stuff about self petitions. Is that a route that is? I'm imagining they're all hard, but how is that route?
Okay, when you use a specific example like a sheriff's deputy, I haven't had a client like that, so I can't really speak to that the way I
Okay.
would. But if we're going to talk about like a self petition, like a work visa, for example,
Mhm.
there is a specific tier of work visa called an EB1. This is a huge, huge deal if you're even going to propose to be an EB1. This is where you could be internationally or even world renowned for your abilities.
Mm.
So, an interesting one that I had is I used one of my first internships when I was in law school for immigration was at a firm that regularly did EB1s and 2s. So 2s are just one rung under that, still extremely important, but not peak top of the field. So an EB2 would be, for example, several clients that we had in that internship was surgeons who knew how to do gastric bypass surgery, which is a very intensive surgery and also an elective. So you want to be ultra secure with that. So the amount of credentials they had to show was extremely extensive. But in terms of an example of an EB1, I have two examples. One that happened, the more recent one that happened during my after I got out of school. I had a internationally renowned Mongolian runner who had written books about his journeys running several 100-miler. I think they're called Ironman runs. I'm not entirely sure, but he could simply run for days. It seemingly run for days straight, and he could and not get tired. He had just the perfect ligaments. He had the perfect body physiology for it. He just never got tired, and so he had publications in Mongolia for his ventures and his runs, and so he was an eligible candidate. Him and I are still in process, but for another example of this in the medical field, to show just how high that this has to be, I was helping a doctor who, if I remember this right, was a major contributor to a vaccine for hepatitis E. Now, did you know that hepatitis E even existed? I didn't until I had that case, but that was work that was required. That he was making groundbreaking research, such that EB2 is very, very high, but EB1 is another level where the United States basically says, I don't care if anybody wants a job. You'll find one eventually. You have the kind of abilities that are so incredibly necessary that we must have you here. Most of the time, you need a work sponsor to actively say, listen, this guy's not just going to be feeling around for a job. We want him, and we want him now. Now, for entertainers, that's a bit of a different story. That one I have much less experience on. But more often than not, what's going on is that they're on tour. They already have several bookings. They know where they are going to play, and so based on that, they're given a visa for that temporary amount of time for them to continue their work here. So those are some options, but after that, it becomes very dependent on the facts, and also dependent on what kind of law we're dealing with, because there have been a lot of changes in business immigration these days. A
Mm.
lot.
Oh, okay, no, cool. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Danny.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
No, obviously, what I'm familiar with is the sponsorship. Because my mother became a citizen, and to my knowledge, I don't know exactly what the process is, but I know that she started sponsoring, for example, my grandmother, some of her sisters, and stuff like that. And can you explain that process a little bit in more detail, how it works?
Sure, sure. So I'm just to clarify. So this is your mother who's making the
Mhm.
decisions, correct?
Right.
And these are for your siblings. How old are all they?
I mean, the first one that she had sponsored was my grandmother. So obviously she's elderly, and her sisters are probably at that time. I want to say late 30s, early 40s.
Okay. So the reason why I ask is that there's a big difference depending on whether or not you're dealing with somebody who is over or under the age of 21. So
Mm,
we have a legal term for this, although it
Mm.
sounds, like, and our legal terms just sound so hoity-toity, like we're splitting hairs, but it's important. So when you're under the age of 21, you're considered a child. When you're over the age of 21, but of
Mm.
course it's your parent sponsoring you, you're considered a son and or daughter. So in those circumstances, two qualifiers are if you are under the age of 21 and unmarried, you're considered an immediate family relative, which means you can immediately start a green card and fully process the application. So there are two forms that are part of every family petition. There's the I-130 that's done in the perspective of the person who's already has papers, saying, "I want to reserve the right for a green card for this person over here." And on the other side, there's a second form that's called the I-485 in the perspective of the beneficiary, the person who doesn't have a green card yet. To which they say, someone else is asking for me. It's my time. I'm using this application to formally request to actually get the green card. So immediate families members can get it. Can get both applications done at the same time, and the process is usually about a year. Things are shifting a lot these days, so don't quote me on that. But about a
Mm.
year.
mhm,
When you're dealing with people like when you're dealing with a pandemic like that, where everyone is in their 30s and above, they're all considered sons and daughters. So there is a bit of a wait time for them. I'd have to refresh my memory as far as how long that would be. But the first step would be filing an I-130 petition. So the parent would say, "Hey, I want to reserve the green card." Then there's the wait time, and then after the wait time concludes, it's called a priority date. So they like timestamp when you filed the I-130. And then after a certain length of time passes by, then after they reach that your time in line, essentially, you're now eligible to file for the I-485. So that's when you actually get the green card for the person you're actually looking for. I'm shooting out of the top of my memory here. I believe it's about a 2 to 3 year wait, but please don't quote me on that.
mhm.
Okay. Yeah, and then from what I understand, when it comes to sponsor, it's only family members, right, that can sponsor somebody.
Well, for family petitions, yes. The
Okay.
relationships are like this: it's parents asking for for their children.
Mm.
Um, if they're under 21, much faster process, but you can still do it if they're and unmarried. But if they're over 21, still can do it. So it's parents to children, children to parents, it's spouses to each other, and it's United States citizens. Only United States citizens, residents can do this, petitioning for their siblings. But
Mm.
that is a really long process. That I did check in on for a consultation just earlier today. If I remember this right, remember how I told you that they're timestamp these cases and they're only listening to
Mhm.
cases. The way it works is they say we're only listening to cases from this date going backwards. Right now, they are listening to only to cases for siblings that were timestamped to 2007 and behind. So that's a wait time now of about 18 years.
Ooh.
Wow.
That was well, because we're throwing a bunch of, I guess, hypothetical scenarios. So if you
That's
got
what I'm
real,
here for.
if you want real advice, you gotta call Alex.
For sure.
but No, one of the things, and thank you for answering these questions, was one of the things that I heard, and I was telling Danny before this, and I don't know if I heard it right. There's either not enough immigration lawyers or judges, and it makes it take longer than kind of. I don't know if that's kind of what you were saying right now, right? If you were saying like an 18-year wait time, is it because there is a shortage in either or? I think it might be judges, that I heard, but I could be wrong.
So,
And yeah, go ahead.
well, so that's the thing. It's how do I say this politely? There is I have a lot of employees who I have a certain policy. I have an open door policy. If somebody wants a job, I'll give them the job. They will show me if they're any good.
Mhm.
So I have wound up having to train about 24 people in my career personally. And I've gotten used to explaining how all of these functions work. All that just to say that it's well, first of all, it's been a pleasure to be able to teach people about this kind of stuff. But I've always learned that the number one thing I got to teach my staff is that there is a magical rule that's underlying any law, anything regarding immigration law. That magical rule is discretion. So much of immigration is discretionary. And the reason for that is because we're not actually a part of any formal law enforcement system in the context that
Mm.
we're under the courts or we're under the state or even the formal federal police. Immigration is under an agency. So there, the three branches: there's Congress, there's the presidency, and there's the Supreme Court. This agency derives its power with authorization from Congress and derived from the president's, and I need to emphasize this, exclusive power to control immigration policies in the United States.
Policy.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? Translate to? It translates to, since the president can say literally anybody can come in or anybody can stay out. And he can use any qualifiers, including race and nationality. I'm sorry, folks, that's just the reality. Once it starts delving down into the agencies, because of course the president can't do all this by himself, it's left to the discretion of the officers that are involved in these cases to decide whether or not, so long as they're in the parameters of the black letter of the law, whether or not someone qualifies or doesn't. So I'm giving you a long-winded foundation to this. I'm trying to couch this in that way because to answer your question, the reason why these applications for sibling petitions take 17, 18 years doesn't have to do with the number of judges. It doesn't have to do with any concrete law. It has to do with discretion. They made a decision that they were going to make this wait time super long, and they can
Mm.
whenever they'd like. The reality is that under the black letter law, there is a requirement to make it an option for a sibling to petition for a sibling so long as they're a United States citizen. But the way presidencies, since that law was passed many, many years ago, has been able to jigger it is by extending it longer and longer and longer to the point where it
Incentivize.
Incentivizes. Mhm.
in try. Because as soon as I tell a client, oh, you can ask for your sibling, but you're going to have to wait till 2047 for them to become a United States citizen, they don't even try. They don't even get started.
Mm.
And another discretionary factor, how many judges are present in the courts? Although these are two separate matters, the number of judges that we have available is also subject to the discretion of the agency. Immigration judges are not judges as you recognize them. They're not judges of the state. They're not federal judges. They're not circuit court judges or none of these things.
Hmm.
In fact, technically speaking, immigration judges aren't judges at all. They are simply administrators of called the Executive Office of Immigration Review, or the EOIR. They still wear robes. They still have federal rules of evidence that they follow as a guideline, which in courts would be a hard rule. But they have a lot of leeway to handle the court the way they do because in the end, when we really get down to brass tacks, it's not actually a court. So everything from how they manage it to how many judges there are is a discretionary factor based on funding, based on how they want to cap the number of judges. I'll tell you where judge numbers is affecting our situation. We are having a huge backlog in terms of how and when clients are getting their day in court. Recently, we've had a number of firings, in fact. And although there has been no explanation as to why many of these judges, some of whom I've known, one of which she was a former colleague of mine in a law firm before she became a lawyer, this was a situation that we never got full transparency on as to why they started firing all of these judges. But it was very serendipitous that some of the highest grantors of asylum were some of the first people to get let go. Um,
Mhm.
and now they're being replaced by people who, even in a year, it's becoming very clear these people are not as inclined to grant a case as these previous judges did. And why does this switch of a judge from one to another suddenly mean that cases that could have won suddenly aren't winning? Discretion,
Yeah.
because have the ability, because the concrete letter of the law for asylum example is that if you have a characteristic that you are unable and unwilling to change, like your nationality, your race, your sexual orientation, and you're being persecuted primarily because of that, that's like one of the main motives of the persecution. You could in theory win asylum, but that's very vague. What's persecution? What is like how do you really prove the motive of people who aren't in the courtroom? What's the right amount of threshold of evidence to say, hey, I had actually shown you that that's enough evidence to show that's the reason why they attacked him, or any one of 100 other factors that that I don't have time to get into right now. Who decides? The judge decides, and how does the judge decide? Through the discretion. So,
Mm.
so yeah, to answer your original question, the reason why, like one way that the fewer judges is impacting the courts is I'm getting some cases that are pushed to 6 months from now because that judge is new, and I got some cases that are being pushed to 2029 because that judge has just gotten the backlog of two other judges. Um,
Mm.
if it doesn't seem to make sense, because it doesn't, because in the
Yeah.
end,
Yeah.
it's just full of people, and these people are full of mistakes and administrative errors and make a lot of organizational issues. I
Mm.
had just last week a judge who double booked me on purpose with another client, hoping and praying that that one of these two cases would either get dismissed or something. And since it didn't happen, she kicked my case 2 years 2 years in the future.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
what's
So if I'm
Okay.
understanding this correctly, the presidents have the ability or their discretion to change those policies to see those cases for sponsorship. Is that correct?
Well, we're talking about two different things. What the judges don't handle most family petitions, and they don't handle any work visas at all. So that's not really in the real house. However, what is to talk about discretion? Here's a great example. In terms of how to muck up the process for a work visa, I'm sure you heard the news many months ago that H-1B applications were being proposed to raise their fees
Hmm.
up to $100,000 for every new application. Like
Hmm.
that's a very easy way to say, okay, under local law, I have to make this visa an option, but I can always make it so expensive that nobody except that the most highest qualified workers would even try to get in the first place. So this will, so doctors who make $250,000 a year, lawyers who are somehow internationally renowned, celebrities, they can still use these visas, but
Mhm.
the average worker who is just trying to help, like if I wanted a paralegal, I would never use an H-1B in order to hire them because I would be paying more in fees to get them here than I would pay them.
Mm.
So that's a way that that discretionary factor plays a role where under the letter of the law, there's still the right to a visa, but it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply in any practical term. And yeah, so and in the courts, again, like I said before, what is persecution really? The judge decides.
So the judges are the ones that decide that.
Well, judges are the president has this huge level of authority to decide outside of the letter of the law what does and doesn't qualify for someone to get asylum, citizenship, so on and so forth. But of course, the president can't handle every application. There are several million undocumented migrants in the United States. So he divests that power to several hundred judges that are distributed throughout the United States, who thereafter take on that responsibility, handle one portion of the president's exclusive power. And there it's well, is this person in proceedings? Yes. Is this person in danger of getting deported? Yes. Does this person want asylum? Yes. That's in my wheelhouse. I handle that.
Mm.
So the reason I asked that is because, okay, and I'm just going to be honest and transparent. Throughout all these different presidencies that we've had, different presidents, whether they're Democrat or Republican and whatnot, there doesn't seem to be a real solution for this immigration problem, right? So
Mhm.
people talk about immigration reform, and there's a lot of finger pointing from one side to the other side. And at the end of the day, we want to know what the truth is, what can really be done, who has the power to make those decisions. And as you're explaining this, it seems like the objective or the agenda is to not incentivize people to um,
Even start the process.
go through starting the process.
Yeah.
Whether I mean, there's so much information, but that's what it's sounding like. Am I off with what I'm taking away from that?
Well, let's be clear on this. I'm going to be very frank with you in practical terms. And keep in mind, I come from a conservative background. There are things about this presidency I do like. And as soon as they started the initial roundups of people who were part of gangs, who were criminals, I wasn't going to necessarily, like jump in
Lose
protest.
any sleep? Yeah.
No,
Mm.
but at the same time, now we're entering a situation where, because of this like conundrum, where at the same time there is a letter of the law, but the president has a lot of leeway inside of those bounds, we have a situation where no one can really be satisfied. So I'm going to give you an example. Um, the United States, I've already given you an example of where the president can't really change the fact that he had the right to get a visa through, let's say, a civil petition or through an H-1B visa, but he can finagle it so that it's very difficult in order to obtain it. Another
Mhm.
way
You
that
you
works
could change like the priority status basically of it.
exactly.
Mm.
But another way in reverse of this is the president does not have the ability to simply invent a visa to give everybody. He could actually give. He could actually go through the trouble of giving. There. So an example of what that would look like is, let's say we made a new family petition where aunts and uncles can petition for their nephews and nieces. That can't just be automatically changed by the president. The president also can't take away, let's say, your right to have an attorney for your immigration proceedings. That would be contrary to both black letter law passed by Congress and the Constitution, because we all have a right to representation.
Right.
But what's the result of this? The president has just enough power to de-incentivize the options that are there, and he has just and when it's a more liberal president, they have just less than enough power to make it easier for everyone to get new options in order to get their green cards. Now it's more complicated than that, but the reality is that in order to get real, true, comprehensive reform of in immigration, we need the cooperation of both Congress and the presidency. That's why Obama had to settle for DACA when he was the president, because it was a discretionary form of leave. He had the authority to say, "I'm not going to pursue these people. I'm going to make it a matter of policy that I can't." And the president Trump tried to take away DACA, and he was contested in the courts because there was an argument to say that he can't just unilaterally take it away once it's been given. So there are limitations, both to give and to take away. DACA is actually a really good example of that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's it is so, I guess, confusing, right? And because there's so much that goes into it, right? There, like you said, the president and what priority he puts on it, and then delegates to whoever else is running that, right? Like you said, if it's a more liberal president, it's probably easier. But what we've been kind of trying to tell people with the videos we post, or when we talk about immigration, is that's going to continue, that kind of like a ping pong game, right? Just hitting it back and forth until Congress, the legislative branch, actually changes something that becomes law. um and until then, it's like you said, it's discretionary, right? It's like, I'm gonna hit it to you this time, and then hits it back, and then they're just, there's people's lives that are trying to get this figured out, and they're just, that's what frustrates me with the whole immigration thing, is that there's constantly promises of, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna fix this, and nothing ever gets done. Nothing of substance, right? Nothing where like you're saying, the next president can't come in and then change the route or the target. Um,
So,
so yeah, that's kind of what I kind of see.
so let me give you an example of how convoluted this can get.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you're aware of TPS for Venezuelans got revoked.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't that straight, simple an option. First, in this time last year, just before he left the presidency, Biden had renewed the TPS program for the people who already qualified. He didn't make it. There were two programs. He renewed the one that was getting ready to expire. Now that happened in the last month of his presidency. Donald Trump, within 3 months of him becoming president, he revoked it. Then a federal judge heard a suit saying that the president didn't have the authority to revoke TPS once it was granted, even if it was granted by a previous president. And that judge said, listen, we're going to do a nationwide stop. This is an injunctive order. That just means we're going to do an order for now until we sort this out. We're going to hurt people a lot more if we take it away and then give it back than if we keep it and then take it away later. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a blanket rule. Everybody keeps their TPS, sort this out, and usually that means going all the way up to the Supreme Court. Until the Supreme Court said, actually, local federal judges don't have the authority to make a nationwide injunction like that. So we lost TPS again. And then we went through the whole process up to the Supreme Court, and then they continued to make more and more decisions against TPS being renewed. And then we lost 3 to 4 more programs for TPS, including the other one for Venezuela. I believe there was one for Nigeria and several other ones. So we were in a situation where in 1 year, no, I'm sorry, in the span of like 8 months, we had TPS renewed, TPS revoked, TPS restored, TPS taken away again, TPS permanently. Bam! Get out.
Okay, you're just back and forth, huh?
Exactly, like a literal slap in the face against Venezuelans who just wanted to stay here and didn't know what was going on in their lives. There was nothing fair about that. Nothing fair about that. I had a family of 5 I was taking care of. I renewed all their applications, told them, don't worry, Biden renewed it. And then I looked like a fool being their representative because I called them 1 month and said, I'm sorry, you lost it. Then the next month I said, actually, it's back. And then I called them up 3 months. Actually, we lost it. That doesn't happen in any other form of law. Any other form of law. Can you imagine if every 6 months carrying a certain substance meant you committed a felony and then every other 6 months it doesn't?
That's crazy. That's crazy. And this is a question that I've always wanted to ask and get some clarification on because okay, so amongst Latino communities, this is what is believed to be true, is that this process is so complicated and it's so convoluted, like you just explained, with so many different circumstances and changes that you're describing, is that it's a money-making system so that immigrants are submitting applications, and if people don't know, it's not just submitting paperwork, but there's a cost tied to that. So is this a matter of making money is for profit?
There is an element in that where the government isn't looking to make a profit, but the government is trying to have immigration be more self-sustaining. The presidency passed the Big Beautiful Bill Act, and that act did, among many other things, it raised the fees for a lot of forms of relief. For example, work authorizations. So just so we're clear, if you have a pending application, it could be, well, not anything, but the majority of applications that you can file, if it takes longer than 6 months to get a final conclusion, you can get a work authorization so you can work temporarily while you're here in the United States. Because the government's supposed to be understanding of the fact that if you're here for months with a pending application, you need some way to sustain yourself. So those work authorizations used to cost $420. And if you were, let's say, an asylee or a potential asylee asking for asylum, your first time requesting it was free. Now it doesn't matter. Who you are or where you're coming from or how many times you applied. Every work authorization, except for a couple of exceptions, costs $520. So that's their way of you paying for the guy who's reviewing the paperwork, doing all this stuff. All that kind of thing. So
administrative fees.
It's not like a business, but it is a way that they're aiming to make it worth their while to review a case in the first place because Doge and we want to balance the budget, which they never did, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's one of the most common either questions, complaints, or whatever, right? It's too expensive and it takes too long, right? It's a combo of that.
Yeah.
But kind of to switch over to more current events, talk about ice and stuff like that. And again, thank you for answering all the questions that we've had.
And
The thing from my personal point of view, how I see it, and we can, like I said, tie it into current events, is I personally feel that sanctuary laws, state, cities, you know, obviously, I think they're put in place, right? They sound like they're put in place with good intentions. I kind of get it, but when you don't have local law enforcement working with ICE on undocumented people that
Are
committed,
criminals.
you know, crazy crimes, whether it's assault, uh, DUIs, whatever. But there's something on top of just being here illegally, so to speak. I think that hurts more than it helps because the way my mind kind of sees it or works is that, well, if and we can use Minnesota because a lot of the stuff's been
everyone
happening
talks
there.
about
So if I'm Minnesota, if I'm the governor, and okay, I know Trump and Homan are prioritizing quote unquote criminals. Um, I feel like it would make more sense for me to be like, okay, this guy's locked up here. He's got this many priors added onto he's here illegally. You know what I mean? Kind of do the transaction in the jail or in the courtroom, whatever, peacefully, so to speak, versus having ICE out in the streets trying to find these guys or find these people. And then, there's a lot of good people that are also undocumented, but they're trying to make a good life. Then they get caught in the middle because they didn't just give this guy up that had like 3 DUIs. So that's the way I look at it, that it doesn't really pay off at the end, especially again, depending on it's discretionary, right? What the president wants, then you end up where we are now. So what do you think of the sanctuary laws overall? I think it hurts, especially in a time like this, more than helps.
Well, let's be clear. The term of sanctuary city, sanctuary laws, all of this stuff, it's not as formal as you may think. It's more like, again, just a set of policies. Generally speaking, what it means is this city or this state or this whatever is not going to be in the work of hyper cooperating with immigration. Now, even in like cities like New York, if you commit a certain kind of crime, they will cooperate with immigration. That is for sure. You're caught with assault, you're caught violating order of protection, you're caught with a DUI, especially if somebody gets hurt. What will happen is you'll be put in jail, and you'll be put through the process that's typical for somebody who is going to jail for these crimes. But then, when you're released, supposedly on bond for the criminal matter, you won't actually be released. You'll be put on you'll be given a document that's called an immigration hold, where ICE says we're reserving jurisdiction over you, so that when you're released from here, you're not released. You're transferred over to our custody, and then we begin deportation proceedings with you in jail. Now, all that being said, the reality is this. Yes, people are getting caught in the crossfire. A lot of really unfair things are happening in this administration, even though I do understand that there is a basis and a reason for it. I'm
Mhm.
not going to completely discount the justifications that the Trump administration has for aiming to deport so many people. They did people come in through the border? Yes. Did they come in here
Mhm.
without papers? Yes. Did they come in here without papers and now like seek out work that yes, more underprivileged people who are already in the United States could get? These are all points. There's also something to be said about the fact that reality is. I'll give you a perfect example. One day, this man was actually later detained. This was during the first Trump administration. I sat in there with a gentleman who had two children, who had a loving wife, but they were both undocumented. He was aiming to do what they call a motion to reopen because he had already gotten a deportation order, but he had a new hope that maybe he qualified for something new. And so he submitted that application. Now he was mandated to do we'll call it an ICE version of parole. He had to constantly report there every couple of
Mhm.
months to show that he was still around, still pursuing his case. Now every time you go, you do roll the dice on whether or not immigration, in their discretion, wants to detain you because they have the discretion to do this at any time. It's just an alternative to detaining you to be doing these report dates. Anyway, he goes in, and the ICE officer sits down, and he's fuming. He says, "All right, fine. Here, he's got 6 more months, and if this doesn't work, he's going home." And by the way, I got to think about all this. I don't know, like he must have had a bad day because he didn't have to say any of this. He said, I hate the fact that I got to deal with a guy like this. This guy came into the United States 15 years ago. He did not have a right to be here. Now he has 2 children and a house. And now I have to be the bad guy and arrest him if he decides to go AWOL or if this case doesn't go well. And I have to be honest with you, it was hard to debate with him on that one because although it's very sympathetic, it was a very sympathetic situation. He didn't like nobody there in that room wanted to separate this father from his children, but he came into the United States. He did break the law, and now what he's done is he's set up a whole life here on a foundation of sand because he was always in danger of being deported, and now he has children that rely on him here and a wife that relies on him here, and like a full 6-figure income that's paying for the house, and all of this gets ruined because ultimately the initial start of all of this was that he cut somebody else in line who would have given anything to have the opportunity that he had to come into this country. Now that's the kind of gray area that I never could have a full solution for. I want him to be taken care of. I've been doing this for 10 years. I made it my life's work to advocate for the immigrant. And at the same time, when the officer said that, I couldn't necessarily automatically say he was wrong or in the right. That's just how wild these things get at this point. Do I want immigration reform? Yes, I do. I want to make sure that these families stay together and that they're taken care of. But it's moments like that where I just see the impossibility of the situation with the laws being the way that they are. So I'm sorry if that didn't answer your question, but like that just came straight to my mind when you brought that up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd like to kind of ask you a follow up on that because I actually did want to ask you this later on, but a perfect segue into this. You talked about unfair and people cutting in front of the line, like you just mentioned right now. With everything that happened I mean, nobody really knows how many illegal immigrants came in under Biden's administration. But can you speak to the unfairness to the other people that have been, waiting and going through the process of, the immigration process and, trying to, follow the rules? Can you give us an example on that?
Sure. So there's I know several people who are relatives of mine. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'm actually the son of immigrants myself. I'm half Colombian, half Ecuadorian. I have relatives who have been filing for everything from a work visa to a visitor's visa. They just want to touch the concrete in this country and just want to, that they're, like just see this land of opportunity for themselves. And they can't. And they can't because their immigration policies are much, much tougher now. And they weren't before. In another, like my father got his green card. To contextualize just how wild this has gotten, this was in the 70s. He did have a 2-day visa in the United States. Now I'm talking colloquially here. The law has shifted so dramatically since this time period that it's basically like it's completely out of my wheelhouse as a professional. But I'll tell you the story that I understand from my father. He had a 2-day visa as a to come into the United States. I don't recall exactly what work he had, but he came here. He did his work. He overstayed his visa, and he was here for about 6 months without papers. He had a half brother who helped him get his paperwork together through a program that was perfectly in the clear back in those days, but it was a very temporary program. In 9 months, he got a green card through a sibling petition. A very, very like something that's completely unheard of today. So we had a law system in the past where people were sympathetic to people's situations where it wasn't so difficult to come into this country. But then you have situations like the Biden administration that didn't have any proper screening at all for the people who were coming in, and also didn't push hard enough for a better legal route for people to come to the United States. So we have people who tried to do it the right way to come in, who were just lingering in limbo for a completely unknown amount of time. And at the same time, other people who took, admittedly, a very dangerous route through coyotes, and the cartels in order to come into the United States. But in the end, they came and decided to take that opportunity immediately. What's the consequence to my cousins who are trying to do this legally? Well, I want to bring us back to the reality of what helped get Trump into the presidency in the first place. I had people who were talking about how they hate Trump and they hate the fact that he's doing all this, but they also were telling me how they were scared to walk around at night. I remember when I was walking around New York City and you would see lines of immigrants all on the street, like with no place to go. Um, Hotels were getting packed with
Yeah,
immigrants, which was
we heard.
cost. It was reality is it was costing our economy billions of dollars in order to maintain them. And on top of all of this, these people weren't screened, so we had no idea if they did have a criminal background. This was potentially very dangerous. Um, there is a reason why people said enough is enough. We'll take Trump because at least he'll deal with this. Even the same people who told me after he won, yeah, I hate Trump. I can't believe that he won. Would also say, but like also, like there aren't as many shady people walking around at night, and I do feel a little safer. And I guess it's a little better, but I still hate Trump.
Yeah, they
But
can't let go of the emotions.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but but here's my point. My big point is there was a problem that was being so thoroughly unaddressed by the Biden administration that a clampdown isn't just. I'm not even going to say it's understandable. It's just a natural result of what would happen after someone for so long. There was just no proper oversight in the
Mhm.
proper way to get people into this country. So who suffers? People like my
Yeah.
cousin who
Yeah.
wanted to get in here all along legally, couldn't during the Biden administration, and now definitely are having a harder time in this administration because they don't have $100,000 for the H-1B.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that people got to keep in mind is the cause and effect type of thing, right? Joe Biden letting a bunch of people in unvetted for almost 4 years didn't help the situation today. It's contributing to today's problems. So it's crazy because yeah, we do have ICE now out there. Obviously, they've had the situations with them, killing the lady and that other guy. I think Good and Pretty is, I think, their names. Yeah. Um, I think it's with immigration as a whole in general. It's just so multi-layered. There's so many things that go into it. Um, laws, the discretion, ICE agents, the people that are out there. There's a lot of things in the, what do you call it, the crossfire, just in it. It's like the onion, right? There's a lot of layers to it. And we have people protesting ICE, and ICE is just, in a sense, just trying to do their job. Kind of like the example you gave, right? He doesn't want to be the bad guy, and separate a family, but they, at the end of the day, the law of the land is a certain way, and hey, it's their job. So we kind of, you have to understand that too.
And
Um,
there's something else I'd like to jump in and mention about that story since you brought it up again.
yeah.
I am half Colombian, half Ecuadorian. My client was Guatemalan. Three guesses to what race the ICE officer was.
The shooters, not white.
Nope, he was straight up Salvadoran, and a
Yeah.
Salvadoran migrant at that. Like this is, I want to make sure we're very clear on
Yeah.
this. One thing I will not tolerate is us labeling this as a racial issue. I
Yes.
know that
Exactly.
it's very easy to do so. It's
Mhm.
very easy to do so, but the reality is that we have almost as many people advocating for immigrants as there are ICE officers who are Latino in this matter, and
Mhm.
and they have their reasons to do so. I'm not going to again look. This is not about the protests. This is not about the deaths of these two people, Renee and Alex. That was so horrible that it happened to them. No one wanted that to occur. I'm only trying to make a point here that say what you will about this. This is unfair, unconstitutional, that this is not a proper manner to carry out justice. I'm with you on all of this. But I have seen way too many people being able to speak fluent Spanish on the other side of those masks in these ICE arrests to be able to tell you that this is purely about race. It's not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The fact I'm personally insulted by the fact that people would just assume that because of your race you're going to have a certain political opinion. It doesn't work that way.
It does
My
not.
parents, as an example, the funny thing about my parents is that they are both the most diehard MAGA hat wearing Trumpies you have ever met.
Shout
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and like the funny thing is that the people who know this are other Latinos. The people who are shocked are the people the white people who are taking to the streets to do these protests in the first place.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're, they
You just
they're like,
reminded me.
well, why are those ICE officers speaking Spanish?
I mean, you would want that, right? To communicate effectively with the people they're trying to pick up, right? If I can speak to you in Spanish and you're, hey, estoy aquí porque tengo esta orden, yada, and then the person understands you.
Yeah,
I don't, it makes sense to me. It's like it's being a little bit more humane, so to speak, because you want the person to know, hey, this is why I'm here, and not
right.
just I'm, how they make it seem we're just kidnapping this person, doesn't know anything, doesn't understand, didn't get spoken to. So I don't know. You were gonna say something, Danny? Sorry.
No, no, he just Alex reminded me of a story, something that happened to me a long time ago. This is before, you know, Daniel and I had spoken about getting that podcast together and understanding that, we're being manipulated in so many different ways. And with my prior employer, I would have to travel to Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, all over California, and I happened to be in El Paso. And I remember my coworker's name was Rene, or is Rene, and I was having a conversation with him, and he goes, "You know what? I'm gonna resign, and I'm gonna pursue a different career." And I go, "Okay, really? What are you gonna go do?" He's, "I'm gonna be a border patrol agent." And he broke my brain when he said that because I'm like, "You," I believe he was even born in Mexico. I go, "You're going to be a border agent?" And it, like you said, my mind, the way that it was manipulated into thinking a certain way, I was even racist at that point, if you think about it, because it didn't make sense for him to be a border patrol agent. But then he started explaining the situation and the dangers of living in El Paso and things like that. Aside from it being a good career,
Yeah,
he started explaining those um, reasons to me, and it made a lot of sense. And but no, you just reminded me of that story, and that's a really good point to bring up in this situation.
Mhm.
That we're dealing with here is that we have a lot of people speaking for us, without us asking to speak for us and telling us, what's good and what's bad. It's like, no, we've got
Mhm.
our own mind. We can make our own decisions, and we actually know more about this subject than they actually do.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, like I'll be honest with you, like there's something that's frustrating to me about the method of the protesters that are very, very tone deaf to all of this, despite the fact that in a lot of ways we're aligned. We seem to be only aligned in theory, not in practice.
Mm.
Because while I understand entirely, okay, so let's be clear about this. I'm saying a lot of the more hot takes first. I'm gonna take a moment here to acknowledge what like would be more typical of somebody of my position to say. The way that ICE has been handling a lot of these raids is unconstitutional. They are initiating stops, oftentimes using people's colors. I did say it's not primarily a racial issue, but even Latinos can go up to other Latinos, like hearing them speak Spanish, and say, "Oh, well, this is reasonable cause for me to come forward and start interrogating to confirm that they have papers or not." Just because it's not racist doesn't mean it's not racial, and that is a completely unconstitutional method to initiate a stop and detain someone to ask them for their papers. I see people getting their cars broken into so that because they refuse to cooperate, talk to the ICE agents. And let's be clear, ICE agents are not police. They are not local police, or not state police. They are agents empowered by ICE to carry out immigration. They do have some liberties that other that police don't have. Like in public, they can initiate an arrest of someone they have reasonable cause to believe is an undocumented immigrant without a warrant. That being said, they don't have the right to demand your papers. They don't have a right to demand you answer their questions. You do have a right to record them, and they are violating all of these because they're either not trained well enough, because so many of them were hired at the same time, or they are just under an enormous amount of pressure because anybody would feel frustrated hearing whistles being screamed into their ears for 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
being a hair bit sympathetic while still saying that the way that they're carrying out a lot of their actions is straight up wrong. Now, all that being said, the reality is that people do the protesters who are going there aren't really fully thinking through what they're doing, and I did want to talk about that a little bit because I don't want people to stop exercising their First Amendment right. I have a right to
Right.
speak. They have a right to protest. I want to respect that, and I do want people to be there to record when ICE is making a mistake. Because if people's rights are being violated, they don't have a right to cheat in order to carry out their duties. But the average protester is going there is a very frequently, I'm just seeing the demographics from what I'm reviewing the news, like they're white or native born Americans of one race or another who are often college educated, never had any real run-ins with police or any law enforcement in their entire life, and then they go to these things assuming that because they're US citizens, they are immune from ICE ever being able to bother them. And so you see them
Mhm.
doing ridiculous things like jumping in front between them and the people they're trying to arrest. They try to form human barriers. They are, blowing whistles and doing protests and trying to keep them from entering stores. Guys, they're still federal agents. And when you interfere
Mhm.
with any federal agent's affairs, you can be arrested for that alone.
And
And can I
go
add
ahead.
something to that? And it's not, like they're just serving papers to someone. What they're doing is potentially dealing with dangerous people, and everybody in the situation is at risk. I think is really important. I use the example, the other day is if my son told me that he's gonna go and protest, one of my biggest concerns is that be careful, be mindful of the situation that you're putting yourself in. You're putting yourself in potential harm. And especially what you described that they're doing is physically, getting involved. Like you said, creating barriers or
Mhm.
things like that. That's a very important point to make is that you're putting yourself and other people in harmful situations. And I would even, at this point, we can say lethal, or deadly situations.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like, and again, everyone's right to protest, to be against it. You want to be out there, fine, but there's a line also. There's a limit to that. And just imagine them doing all the stuff that you kind of gave examples of, and at the same time yelling and spray painting things like "kill ICE." How are they supposed to feel? You know what I mean? They're human too. They're gonna have that in their mind that, okay, these people here, they're already yelling at me, they're getting in my way, they're throwing things at my truck, they're kicking my truck, they're yelling "kill ICE." Like, not to excuse it, but they're human. They're gonna be on edge just based on all that, and that doesn't help the situations.
Look, if you want, like there are some ways that these protests have gone down that I find are absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
There was that protest that occurred in the middle of a service of a Christian church in Minneapolis. It's just absolutely
Hmm.
unacceptable, and all because I don't even know if they verified it. I think it was just a rumor that the pastor had either some kind of affiliation with ICE or maybe been an ICE officer. But I don't care if it's true. You don't do that. These are innocent people just trying to like exercise their faith and trying to worship the Lord. And then the Don Lemon character, I swear he got fired from CNN for a reason. He just decided he was going to go in there and start interviewing the pastor in the middle of the service, and these those kinds of reporters who are really just protesters with extra steps, I have no respect for that. I have no
Yeah,
respect.
and I would dare, say that they're professional agitators at this point with the behavior that they're demonstrating. It's crossing that line, and if I'm not mistaken, there is a law against that, and I was hearing some commentary about that, and they were trying to pull up the records of when that last happened, and there is no record of that ever happening. I don't know if you guys heard the same thing, but I agree with you. And everybody, here at Latino Free Minds, we agree, with the First Amendment, of course. and everybody has the right. You made a great point. It's important, for these protesters, if they're going to be protesting and if they're videotaping, important point to make sure that they're not breaking any laws, they're doing everything lawfully. Agreed. But it's those lines that we're talking about right now that frankly don't agree with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want people to be safe. Like I saw that video from I believe her name was Renee Good when she was shot. I'm not saying that her being shot was a good thing at all, but I did see the follow-up video, the video previous to that. She had her car parked perpendicular to the road.
Mhm.
She was actively interfering with either ICE officers walking or even driving through that street. And I don't know what to say about that. If I remember right, there was an ICE officer approaching her when she tried to drive off, saying, "All right, you're under arrest." She tried to open up her car door, and in that moment, again, I'm not blaming her for this. She panicked, as I think anybody would. I don't think she intended to hit that ICE officer. I also think she hit that ICE officer.
Mhm.
And even if she didn't hit that ICE officer, if I was in that ICE officer's position and in that moment had only a split second to make a decision, that'd be a very tough situation to be in. I'm not advocating for anybody's actions in that situation. I'm trying to make clear that is a really, really avoidable situation, and I want to
Mhm.
emphasize what I want protesters to do. I want them to record. I want them to film what they're doing and how they're doing it wrong. I want enormous lawsuits. I want people to become millionaires out of this. I don't want people to put themselves in harm's way, especially considering the fact that they're dealing with people who have guns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
No.
Did you
I,
have something, Daniel, that you want?
no. No. Go for it.
Well, okay, since we're on this topic, I want to get your opinion or your take on the biggest misunderstanding that people have on what's happening right now, what we're being shown on social media, mainstream news. What is the biggest misconception? What is the biggest thing that we're not getting, as everyday citizens here in the United States?
Whew, there's so much.
But the biggest one that's,
From your point of view.
yeah.
All right. There's no bad guys, there ain't no good guys. And I'm going to explain that. I brought it up a little while ago, but I want to really emphasize this. So, back during the Biden administration, I had a client who she was dead to rights. She wasn't winning the case. We pleaded asylum based on an extortion case because gang members were asking her for money. I'm going to skip right to the end, guys. That case isn't one in 10 years of me working in immigration law ever. But we try to spruce it up and say it's her political opinion. She's like trying to pursue the case because she has an opinion that she's against the pseudo government that is the MS-13 in El Salvador. Now, this is all a moot point at this point. El Salvador has cleaned up their act a lot regarding the presence of gangs,
Mhm.
but then that wasn't a strong case either. But at the same time, there was some case law, especially out here in New York in the Second Circuit, that said that at least in theory this could work. So I talked to the officer. It's like a 65-year-old old woman taking care of her grandkids. And he just looks at me and says, let's just talk outside for a second. Go outside, we talk. He says, listen, let's just follow me on this one, counsel. Um, you can see the inklings of a case here. Why don't we just punt on this one? I'm not going to give her asylum, but give them withholding removal, which is a form of relief where um, you don't get a green card, you can't become a citizen, but you are permanently given the ability, kind of like DACA, given a status to stay here in the United States in perpetuity, unless and until the government can prove that your situation has changed so dramatically that you're no longer in any danger in your home country. Now, it used to be an option that you could stipulate to this relief, where you could just say, yeah, I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm going to just automatically agree that you could have won that case. And the judge usually respected that. So we went back inside. The guy said, yeah, we're going to stipulate to withholding removal, not asylum, but withholding. Judge says, counsel, do you agree? I go, yes, we do agree. And there's a grandmother out there who like is able to live and probably like enjoy the benefits of Social Security soon and to take care of her grandkids. And that officer, I won't name names because I don't want anybody in trouble, but he didn't do anything illegal. I want to know that he's still around. That was a member of ICE, a member of the Office of Principal Legal Advisor, the attorneys who were in charge of doing the deportations. And another officer who helped me get something called withholding of with humanitarian asylum, which is like it's so extreme the persecution that you suffered that I don't even have to prove that you'll be in trouble if you go back home. It was just so bad that I'll just give it to you that like you should stay here. Um, those ICE officers save people's lives, and like they're very demoralized as well about all of this.
Mm.
They don't want to continue doing their work because they know that they have to be the bad guy every single time. They don't have the wiggle room to do a guinea. And then we flip it. I'm the good guy, right? No,
Mm.
not automatically. At least I like to think that I do my job very well. I love the work that I do. I think about God about my place in the plan of God every time I go to work. I want to make sure that I go to sleep at night knowing that I'm trying to do good for this world. That being said, I have worked for other attorneys, and I look through the paperwork, and I think, tell you something right now, guys. I'm a born again Christian. Among the many tenets is I'm trying not to curse.
Mhm.
What happens now is that when I start getting mad, I get into these loops where I sound like Joe Pesci in a mob movie you watch on an airplane. Mother flipper, you effing mother, and that's what I'm doing. Like reading this application, it wasn't done right. There are basic boxes that weren't checked off. There's a horrible like 2-paragraph affidavit because you know what a lot of attorneys do when they work in private practice? They do something I call black tagging the case. Well, we're not going to win anyway, so let's do minimum effort, just be enough to be able to not get sued. And since they weren't going to win anyway, we can't be sued for malpractice because one of the tenets of malpractice is you would have won if it wasn't for my fault. So we're going to do the bare minimum so you don't yell at me, and we're going to lose the case, and then I'm going to get another $5,000 from you while we appeal this case. So they black tie the case. I think that's BS because that is like this looking client who gave you like maybe a quarter of what they made that year, and you're just going, okay, well, move on to the next person. We'll buy you a year, so on and so forth. No, if someone hired me, I'm going to go to the mat, and even if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging because that is what the client paid for me to do, and plus I like to argue, so like, it makes me feel happy too. But then I'm reading this application, like just 2 paragraphs, just a dainty little like two articles to demonstrate that there's something going on in their country. And I'm reading, going, you mara, and why do I say all this? Because there are people out there who don't care, and they don't get the fact that they deserve. There should be protesters outside of so many immigration offices going, why aren't you protecting your client's right?
Mm.
So that's what I want to emphasize. There are ICE officers I love. I hope that they stick around and deal with this what I call the Trump winner. And there's so many lawyers that if I had enough time, enough energy, I would file malpractice suits on every single one of them. I don't care if I won.
Mm. Yeah. No, I mean,
Good guys. Or at least there's no lines of good or bad guys.
yeah. Well, no, we appreciate your time, right? Coming on and answering all our questions, and especially you being 3 hours ahead. You're in the future right now.
That's all right. I'm a little past my bedtime, but I'll live.
But just we could end it with this with one more question. I'm actually going to do it in Spanish because I think Spanish speaking people might need to hear this.
Absolutamente.
So,
Sin problema.
¿qué le puedes decir a la gente que solamente habla español, solamente mira a Univisión, Telemundo, agarra las noticias ahí, especialmente con todo lo que ha pasado con inmigración, de un abogado de inmigración, su punto de vista, por qué ICE es necesario y también a la misma vez no todo lo que ha pasado es perfecto? ¿Qué le puedes decir tú para que miren los dos lados?
Ay, Dios mío. Fíjate. Mis amigos, mi familia. Yo voy a decirte eso claramente ahora mismo, por favor. Excusa mi acento, nadie conoce de cuál país es mi acento. Ecuatorianos piensan que yo soy panameña, mexicanos creen que yo soy de Argentina, brasileños creen que yo soy de España, y la gente de España creen que yo soy italiano. Nadie conoce. Escúchame bien.
Universal, eres un universal.
Yeah.
La sola cosa que puedo prometerte es esto. Mire, últimamente yo no puedo prometerte 10 tiempo más vicioso para ti, para ganar su caso, para asilo, para petición de familia, para cualquier visa que tú estás pidiendo. Muchas veces mi estrategia es a pedir a la gente a comprar tiempo para que podamos sobrevivir todo esto para que una otra administración pueda ganar el control de la situación. Y en mi opinión, yo creo que va a pasar en unos años, es que después de este presidente, no importa si es republicano o democrático, son motivados a ganar elecciones. Entonces, después de todos esos duros años, el próximo presidente, mi teoría, quiere parecer la héroe. Entonces, él va a hacer un programa enorme. Vamos a salvar a toda la gente que sobrevivió estos 3 años. Mi punto es esto. Eso es solo una teoría, pero tú todavía tienes derechos para pedir para asilo, para pedir para peticiones de familia, para pedir para visas de trabajo más difícil, más delicado, absolutamente que sí. La noticia está allí a asustarte para sus emociones. No pague atención a eso. Por favor, por el amor de Dios, habla con un abogado de inmigración. Alguien especializado en inmigración, no alguien que haga resbalas y afinar testimonios y unos otros accidentes y un poquito de inmigración. No, el ley está cambiando ya cada semana. Estamos haciendo nuevos argumentos por una nueva avenida que el gobierno tiene a quitar su derecho para su financiamiento de corte ahora mismo. Esas son decisiones nuevas, como 2 meses viejo. Necesitas un abogado especializado en inmigración, dedicado a conocer los cambios en la ley, como tú pagas atención a la noticia. Encuentra un abogado, conoce sus derechos y por favor, por el amor de Dios, no pierda su esperanza. No pierdas su esperanza. Tú necesitas seguir con el tiempo que cada día que eres aquí es un regalo y cada día que eres aquí es un otro día que salvaste usted de esta situación. No pierdes su esperanza. Cuando ellos quitan eso, tú vas a deportar usted. No deja eso a pasar. Quédase con su familia. Cuídese su familia, cuídese su oportunidad que tú tienes aquí, porque yo garantizo, si ellos suceden a llevarte ahora, se van a asegurar que tú nunca más puedes regresar. Y eso es correcto. La ley está allí donde tú no puedes entrar a los Estados Unidos legalmente por años si tú estás deportado, pero solo si tú salgas del país. No escuchen ninguna noticia de inmigración que dije, oh, nos vamos a darte $1,000 si tú regresas. No, 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 no pagues atención a eso. No pagues atención a Dios diciendo, ay, si tú salgas, tú puedes regresar aquí legalmente sin problema. No, 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 no hagan eso tampoco. Habla con un abogado, conoce sus derechos, no permitan ellos asustarte y no permitan ellos mentirarte.
No, pues gracias y pues sí, hacer las cosas correctamente y no esperar y no perder tiempo, ¿verdad? Si uno si quiere quedarse y estar aquí, pues que siga el proceso correcto y hay gente buena, a la misma vez hay gente mala que pues no ayuda a las situaciones, ¿verdad? Pero todos los casos son diferentes y ojalá pues un día haya una respuesta que sirva para todos, ¿verdad? Y pues el Congreso tiene que actuar en eso y mientras de que no hagan eso, pues aquí estamos, ¿verdad? Este es el juego que está puesto. But, thank you for coming on, for all the information you provided. Danny, you got anything else?
There's so much more. I just like to invite him to come on some other time and educate us more on this subject. I but I know Daniel said that was the last question, but just I need to ask you this.
Go for it.
In your opinion, why isn't the system fixed? We have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the manpower, we have the tax dollars behind us to fix this. Why isn't this fixed?
I feel like you have accidentally asked me a very metaphysical question, sir. Like, why do we live in a fallen world? And I mean that seriously, because we live in a very unfair world. We live in a world where I have to deal with parents who are hoping to get a green card because their son has cancer remission. and we're dealing with a world where like we have reformed Catholics that are still in jail, Reformed Christians who are still in jail, who are still just who have to continue to pay on their sentence, even though their hearts have shifted. We have people who are like have their services interrupted by protesters who convince themselves that they're in the right, and that's not even talking about the legal side of this thing. We live in a very, very flawed, fallen world. And that's why I don't let that get to me on a personal level. Do I want my clients to be here? Yes. Do they get detained? Yes, sometimes. Do I lose cases? I hate to say it, but it's true.
Mhm.
The reality is that all you once you start paying attention to how effed up the world is, you've already lost. What you cannot continue to just say, "Oh, it's so terrible, so terrible." It was terrible in the '70s.
Yeah.
Terrible in the '80s. When would you prefer? When we had segregation, when we had slavery, we had like wars where whole towns got slaughtered. Um, I never really got that.
No.
In the end, I believe that I'm just trying to spin my wheel the best possible, and I like to think I do a good job of it. I do it with Christ as my compass. I do it with a staff, all who I found in my church. What a blessing that is! And they are all passionate about the work. I take advantage of my job, and I gave an opportunity to two 20-something women who didn't have a chance of finding a job in this economy, and they are brilliant. And so I've given two people an opportunity. I have kept families together. I've helped people through a difficult time. And you know what? Although I'm not quite answering your question, I apologize for that. The reality is that the reason why it's messed up is because this world is messed up. And even if we got complete amnesty for every single immigrant in this country, the world would still be messed up. There's always going to be something to be upset about. So I choose to be upset about none of it, except what I can control. And I can be a good lawyer and take care of my people. And that is what I hope I accomplish on a day-by-day basis. And that's the best I can say about myself.
You answered the question because people tear themselves trying to decide whether one side is wrong, one side is right. You said it perfectly with the comments that you said before, and with that answer, I happen to agree with you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll keep in touch, and then maybe we can have you back on again, and whatever other questions, or who knows what'll happen from in the
I'd love
coming
to.
days.
Guys, I didn't even get into how domestic violence cases don't win asylum anymore because of Donald Trump. I didn't get into permission where people don't get to have their final day in court anymore. I didn't get into taxes, filing fees for asylum where they weren't there before. Guys, like any week you want to have me, I will have 15 new items for you. It's just that wild in this field these days.
It
But I
is.
just
Okay.
want people to be informed, which is why we initiated this contact.
Yeah, and that's awesome. So we'll stay in touch then, and we'll work something
Make
out.
it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
All right,
quite-
everybody. Well, we hope that everyone that tuned in and is going to tune in learned a lot, at least got a different perspective, other than just like these guys have been talking about. This is my side, this is your side, or this is the good side, this is the bad side. It is a lot that goes into it, and hopefully you're able to pick something up from this conversation, and potentially any future conversations. So, thank you again for coming on, Alex. God bless you, and keep doing your work. From what speaking to you, it does seem to me, and I'm sure Danny, that you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to help people in the best way you can, and that's honorable. And just keep it up.
The only thing I can say is I do my best, but I really, really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I hope this has answered some questions for you and the people who listen to you, and I'm always here to help.
All right, cool. Thank you, man. Well, everybody, God bless you all. Keep an open mind, and we'll catch you next time. Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.